Hi, I'm Heinbach, and it's good to have you back to another Patreon Q&A, number 15, I think, where the good people that support what I do on Patreon ask me questions and I answer them on video. If you would like to have a question answered by me, just subscribe to any tier there and post it in the sticky thread that I put up there. Let's get to it. Gaetan. What interesting techniques are there with a phaser where you have access to separate outputs for the different stages? I actually had to look up which phaser that could be that is available right now, and the only one I found is the Döpfer Vectral phaser. And there's a fantastic description about all the possibilities that you can do by mixing and patching the different outputs of the poles, which enables you to basically get different filtering reactions. But I think for me, the most interesting thing about this would be to take these outputs and just pan them all over, take them to all these different places in the stereo field and then automate that panning. I think that could be absolutely beautiful. And now you make me want to buy that phaser and probably a bunch of infrastructure for panning around it and an input. So I guess thanks for that. But yeah, I really want to try that. So that's a very, very inspiring question. Steve Williams. Thinking ahead to when there will be live shows again, I'm curious about how you choose which gear from a huge collection to take or to perform. Do you build a set around a particular instrument or sound palette? Or do you bring a wide range of gear for flexibility in improvisation? I play with the basic core setup since 2016, and that's all based on the Seat Lombardi Coco Quantus and the Menke voltage memory to control the Coco Quantus, and the Z-Drux organ, plus a reverb pedal, a Neuenarber, and that's the core setup. That's the sound processing and sound generation, and then I only add infrastructure around it. Sometimes it's a microphone to process my voice, which I really like, maybe a kalimba or the OP1 or an iPad to add more tonal possibilities. Or I ask if there's a piano, and then I run the piano through that. Or I add a tape machine to live tape loop a piano, but again into the Coco Quantus. Or I use tiny dictaphones and run those again into the Coco Quantus. So mostly the core setup is always the same. I just change around the periphery. Periphery. And that is how I deal with it, because I feel it's really important to have something that I can memorize, muscle memory. Stage is often not that ideally lit, so I really like to be able to feel my way around the setup and know what I can do with everything. And that's what the Coco Quantus and Z-Drux does for me. Recent instruments I've tried together with that were also the Plumbutter and the Pulsar 23. But for airplane travel, those add a lot in size, and I like to keep stuff in carry-on. I don't want to lose anything. And cramming all these together can be a little bit hard on the instruments. Yeah, but that's how I deal with it. Core setup, just a bit of periphery that changes. And the periphery changes according, of course, to what kind of concert it is, if it's a smaller one or if it's a big space, or what possibilities there are. I like to adjust the setup to the room. Christopher Meyer. When starting to use test equipment, it would be nice to reuse the modular Euro gear I already own and to mitigate the lack of VCA's problem. But I don't see you integrating your modular and test equipment that much. Why? Are there pitfalls, dangers even? I went into this for a different form of experience. I wanted to see how it was done before there was modular. So it didn't make sense for me to integrate, to just treat this as another sound source in a setup. I wanted it to be, for me, a whole experience. After 2 years, I feel like I have not mastered, but I've done a lot with test equipment alone. So now I'm integrating it with everything. In fact, I made a video integrating the test equipment with a common synthesizer. Not that common maybe, but it's the Syntrax, but Erica synths. And that's something I'm working on now. And to integrate the modular, I just bought 2 modules from Australia, and let me just check on the name. It's the Metro Modular Test Eagle, and that allows for integration of test equipment and modular, easily adapting the impedances and converting to banana and such. So there will be a bit of Eurorack directly inside the wall, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I think that's new possibilities now. But I'm really happy that I went the hard route of doing stuff only with test equipment first, because it made different music. Ulrich Umlauf. I just finished an album with solo piano ambient works, and now I'm looking... No. Ulrich Umlauf. I just finished an album with solo piano ambient works, and now I'm looking for a label that might be interested in publishing it. Apart from Psy Records, what labels would you recommend? In that realm, DAW, D-A-U-W, is a beautifully curated, nicely run label that I can recommend, so you could try them. Mike in Texas. Watching your latest vid, adding test equipment to a synth setup, the one we're talking about just now. What would be a beginner way to wire a 2-track reel-to-reel in with your analog synth to get the great feedback loops of echoes? Do you need to loop a tape, etc.? Obviously, experimentation should be part of the plan, but what is the starting point to get the first sounds? That's in the video I made about how to turn any 3-head cassette recorder or reel-to-reel into an echo. Basically, you need a mixer, and you don't even need a loop unless you want to make a loop, which is fun. But you just need a 3-head reel-to-reel or tape recorder and a mixer. You send the audio you want to delay, echo, loop, or whatever using an aux to the reel-to-reel, and then put that reel-to-reel back into the mixer, but not on the aux return, on its own separate channel, because then again you can up the aux and get feedback and get more echoes and feedback. Alain Barr. Hi everyone. What is your top 5 books you used to improve your creative and technical skills to create your wonderful music? I actually get a lot of book recommendations from YouTube, and in the comments people are recommending me books all the time, and that's absolutely beautiful. So recently the thing that I've been really inspired by is Henry Cowell, New Musical Resources, and that's wonderful for inspiration on composition using frequencies, and I really enjoy this. This has been a great help to me. I always say The Soul of Mbira is one of the most inspiring books, and I still can say that holds true, but I don't know whom I gave that to. And I read a bit into this, Programming for Musicians and Digital Artists, Creating Music with Chuck, which was very interesting. And then I love books on instrumentation, whether it's the old school standards by Berlioz or newer ones. In Germany we've got quite a few. I think that are German language only, but Instrumentationslehre, those are very helpful books for composing, because you read about the different ranges, what instruments can do, where they struggle, what their forte is, and that in itself gives me ideas. Jacob Stevens. I've mentioned before that I'm scoring a game set in rural Africa. We have decided that certain areas of the game should have only outdoor nature ambience, no natural music. But the creative part of me cannot be content with just dropping a WAV file straight from my Zoom into the game. Do you have any suggestions how to process an ambient field recording so that it's more interesting than the original, but less than actual music? Put it on tape. No, really. Sometimes it can help to reamp those sounds again through a nice speaker and record them onto tape, and to add a different texture to that. That is one thing that I love about the Nagra, because being a film sound recorder, you can hear the unique tone it imparts onto sound on so many documentaries and films from the 60s and 70s. yeah, it gives me a vibe that I really love. So that would be my first point if I were to process ambient recordings without changing them too much, just giving them a little nudge and maybe vary speeding them a bit and seeing what happens. Yeah, half speed, of course, and then EQ, bandpass filters. See what you can find in there that could be exciting. And then play with distances. So some things can be really close and some things can be really far, and create a sonic environment by all these different close mic recordings to the wider ambiances. And I think there's a world to be had from sound. Dave died. Love the tracks you made in your Eurek 2021 video. Those Cjewman filters are way out of my budget. Yeah, and the prices now are just insane. Can you recommend and elaborate on a few Eurek filters that you think are similar? Anything search. The random source search stuff does ping beautifully. It's more, how do you say, creamy and not as glassy. So it is definitely a different texture, but still rather beautiful. And I haven't really tried the ADAC filter banks, but those could be a good starting point. If you can, yeah, try them out somewhere, that would be something you could have a look at. Michael Konomos. I've spent my career as a visual artist. Music was always something I was passionate about listening to, but I never felt good at it. I bought a synth and some MIDI controllers. I have a small setup now. I'm trying to learn the basics of a piano, but I'm in my 40s with kids. But this isn't a hobby for me, it's a passion, just as important as my visual art to me. I want to express myself creatively, but the skills take time to develop. What advice would you have for someone getting a late start in music? Would that advice be different than what you tell a teenager who is getting into it? Well, I can only say, for a teenager, I would say dedicate as much of your energy as you can into your passion project and be as intense with your time as possible. I mean, I decided when I was 15 that music was the thing that I wanted to do, and that has helped me, I think, a great deal. And there were other things that I wish I would have learned around that, and that's mainly to do with the business of making music, of how to think about music, how to like actually market yourself, which is something I was really, really late in developing. And ever since I did, it really helped me. So that would be a very good skill to have, to both hone your craft and also be a good salesman of your own craft. But basically, the advice would be similar. Just put all the time that you can in there. So the advice in general would be similar. Put in as much time as you can. Another thing that is extremely important is finding people that will help you along with your journey. Like, you might be great at music, but you might not be good at visual art. So see if there's a friend that can help you out with that. Or, yeah, make connections. That's, for someone who's just starting out, probably one of the hardest things to find these people. But if you are 40, you probably know a lot of people and you can make use of your existing networks to help you. And that's probably the only advantage that you have, next from having maybe more money, is that you can use networks, all the people you've worked with in the past and all the artist networks, and you can reach out to them and get connected and, yeah, use people that have experiences and, yeah, work with them, and also pay people to do stuff for you, which is really hard when you're starting out with music. Usually you can't pay anyone anything. When you're 15, starting out and developing things and they're edgy and, yeah, you get some interest, youth itself is a story. Everybody likes to follow the rising star. So this has potential. That's really something that's interests people and gets the story going. So youth itself is a story. With 40, you don't have that pretty crucial advantage. So you have to build your own narration that's simple and comes through easily, why people should care about what you're doing. And of course, the art can speak for itself, but to art, as you probably know as a visual artist, there's always more attached. You can think about that. I mean, when you just look at Reddit, where people post a picture, but it's much more successful if they post themselves with the picture. So people like people and they want to hear about people, and art doesn't stand really on its own in that regard. So it is different, though at the core, it's all about the same principles. Simon Antere, Glück auf! I've seen you use wavetable oscillators, piston Honda and 350 morphing terrarium in your Urek videos, but you have never went in detail in what you use them for. What roles does wavetable serve in your Urek system? Danke. Not much anymore. I've gotten rid of most of them. And I only kept the piston Honda because that's absolutely amazing. And it does sound rather beautifully gritty, and it gives me some of that Waldorf PPG vibe I like. But yeah, I'm not really that interested in wavetables anymore. When I started out with Eurorack, they were very important because they allowed me quick timbral changes with just the flick of a switch, and I got so much mileage out of the E350 and the piston Honda. It was amazing. And I had the 4MS spherical wavetable navigator at some point, and that was so overpowered. That made it so easy to sound good that I couldn't bear it, because at that time I was into stark minimalism of test equipment, and having this thing that's like, I'm beautiful by myself, that was way too much. So I had to sell it, and I sold the E350, and now I'm using wavetable synthesizers because I love wavetables polyphonically. I've got a microwave by Waldorf here, which is gorgeous, and I've got the Ensoniq Fismo here, another gorgeous thing. So these are the wavetables that I'm now interested in, not in the modular as, per se right now. But if you're curious what I did with them, check out my album, The Heat. It's full of piston Honda and 350. Oh, and my favorite trick was always to run the E350 into the piston Honda. That just is actually one of my most favorite wavetable sounds, because you combine the smooth morphing with the grittiness of the piston Honda. Klangrausch. Hey Heinbach, what kind of gears, tools do you use behind the scenes? In one video you briefly mentioned the SPL Vitalizer, Buckburn stereo compressor, and we want a graphic equalizer. Maybe there is more. I made a video on recording electronic music to tape, which you can see here, and there I go into the output chain that I use right now. I've got a decent chain of analog processing going on before I record digitally, and digitally I mainly use the Klanghelm MGUC compressor and Vox & Go Elephant and the Ableton internal equalizer. That's basically my main tools for processing. And of course, Isotope RX, which helps me a great deal often. Do you have any solution how to submit gear questions without fearing the Heinbach eBay effect kicking in and having no chance to buy that gear for a normal price afterwards? It is a bit random to me what gear gets like the Heinbach boost. The Zuiko ST50, definitely. That's now 4 times as much than it was before. But the Varaku, not. That's still the same price. Maybe just ask in the subreddit. That is a nice place to ask questions, and there are more people that know so much about rare stuff. It's amazing. Tony, I just bought Landfill Totems. Great instruments at a great price. Thanks. Not a question, but yeah, the plug is appreciated. Buy Landfill Totems, my album and instrument together with Spitfire Audio. It's available now for €29 and $29. And here's the video I made about it. David Wallen. Hi, I'm wondering about the use of guitar pedal with synthesizers and non-instrument level stuff. Some say that a reamp box is needed when connecting the level gear to guitar pedals, as the levels and impedances aren't the same. Yes, some pedals really sound bad when used with line signals because they get overloaded, because they're not high Z. And some even, will freeze. I remember my old Strymon pedal and Modular, that could lock it up when it got over voltage. So it is useful to use an attenuator or like a reamp box or anything for line signals in some cases, especially overdrive and stuff where it's really reacting to how you're playing. But I never bothered, mostly because delay effects and all that stuff, they're usually pretty fine with line level. Most modern pedals are anyway, because yeah, pedal companies know that people that have synthesizers like guitar pedals too, so they keep the input voltage ready for all of them. You're not gonna damage anything. It might just sound not optimal, especially with some older pedals. With some, it might just sound gorgeous to overdrive it, like Chase Bliss stuff. Beautiful with modular levels. Grrr, good stuff that happens there. But some things like loopers, they can be a bit tricky because you might overload internally easily, so you have to watch the levels there. Rom of Romcom. In several of your videos, I've heard you mention microrhythms. Can you explain this concept? Are microrhythms always accidents caused by the interplay of other rhythms? Or perhaps are there any ways to influence them to appear? Or can you even create them intentionally? I hope I used the term correctly. In general, microrhythm is the feeling of music. It's when you, for example, when you got the snare, is it in front of or behind the beat? That will be the microrhythm part of a beat. And that can change your perception of a beat drastically. So it's a bit like shuffle, and yeah, how you feel that is what, in musicology at least, is called a microrhythm. What I sometimes use is just the word microrhythms when I mean like really tiny clickety clackety clackety sounds, and which is just like music speak for ASMR-ish clickety clackety tiny rhythms, beatings. So when you've got two oscillators and you detune them, you get rhythms, and these rhythms are very tiny and they're outside of the beat structure, so I again refer to them as microrhythms. I actually did a short study on microrhythms, and that is how sound influences our perception of rhythm. For example, when you've got an 808 bass drum that rings longer than a 707, how does that change your perception of the same rhythm? And that changes the microrhythm of the whole thing. When you notate it, you would still get the same signal, but the sound changes your perception of that beat. So yeah, sound can also be part of a microrhythm. At least that is what we proposed there, but it was, yeah, just some undergrad project. I think that's it for this Q&A. Thank you all for sitting here with me and asking these questions. And yeah, if you want to get a question in, again, just subscribe to any tier on my Patreon and find the sticky thread. And thanks to everybody who supports me there. You are truly the reason I can keep on making these videos. So thank you all for watching. I'll be seeing you in the next one. Roll credits.